This episode is presented by Visit Cedar City Bryan Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Bryan Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center. Dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs, it provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. The center features the Makerspace, where entrepreneurs and small businesses can have access to 3D printers, video production and photography equipment, t-shirt printing, and more. Whether you're starting a new venture or looking to expand an existing one, the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center offers the tools and guidance to help you succeed. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. Hello and welcome to another episode of Explore Local Podcast presented by Visit Cedar City Bryan Head in partnership with Cedar City Iron County Economic Development. This is produced by Dallas Smith Media, and I'm your host, David Johnson, Economic Development Director for Cedar City and Iron County. All right, and welcome to the Explore Local Podcast. Today we have Tyler Galetka. He's the airport manager of the Cedar City Regional Airport. Welcome, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks, David. I appreciate you having me on here. Really excited about this. So,
yeah,
like I was saying, this is my first camera or podcast opportunity. So
it's all right.
We'll see what we get.
You needed the opportunity to show off that mustache. So
exactly.
I'm always complimenting it. I don't know. Maybe I'm jealous. Maybe I need to grow one.
Yeah, you should. It's here to stay. So
it fits very well with the pilot atmosphere. So my brother-in-law he was a pilot for SkyWest.
Okay.
And is now a Southwest pilot. But when he became a pilot, all of a sudden he grew a mustache.
Yep.
And at first I thought, oh, he's, just trying to be funny for a little bit. But that baby has stayed for years to come.
They stick.
Yeah. And you know what? It suits him well. It suits him very well.
Once you do it, it's either it's for you or it's not. And when it's for you, it's not going anywhere. So the wife supports it. So that's all I need to have.
That's the key. And the wife has to support it. Yeah, it makes you look so mature as well, you know? Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, enough about the stash. Tell me, give the 30,000 foot view of the Cedar City Regional Airport, because I think a lot of people don't realize what we have here as far as an airport is concerned.
Yeah, Dave, that's a great question. We get that a lot. A lot of people are very unaware of what we have going on in Cedar City. Mm-hmm. We've even gotten the response from people when the airport was built. They started bringing all this noise. I'm like, the airport's been here for a very long time. So it wasn't built, I don't believe, in many people's lifetime here in Cedar City. So back to the roots of the Cedar City Airport, we're looking at the 1920s was the first mail carriers that we saw landing in farm fields in Cedar City.
Oh, really?
To drop off letters. Yeah, we have a nice little letter in our terminal.
Nice.
I believe dated 1923 for Cedar City.
That was an upgrade from the Pony Express, right?
Definitely. A little bit of an upgrade. So... But so that's where it all began. Now, the construction of the actual airport was sponsored by the federal government in I believe, the late 30s in kind of preparation for wars and things like that. It became more of a flight training area for military aircraft. So the history has been there a very long time in this valley. It's pretty much in the same location. Our runway orientations have changed since the 1930s. And obviously Cedar City took ownership of that airport in the 40s or maybe early 50s, somewhere around that time frame. Cedar City was able to take ownership. And so since then, we've had a very up and down kind of operation going on. Either there's a lot going on or there's not. Yeah. And fortunately right now we're actually, we had a lot going on at Cedar City Airport. We're very proud of that. So
yeah, that's awesome. One thing I've heard some people say is people are always surprised at how beautiful our terminal is for an airport our size. A lot of times airports our size, we'll just say they're a little box. The terminal is just a little rundown box from the 80s where they're just getting by, and ours is just this beautiful. I don't know, maybe you describe it. It's got it's almost like log cabin-ish, right?
That's the theme of the terminal, is a lodge or a log cabin. Mm-hmm. So the construction of that was 2005. I think it was Mayor Sherrod at the time. He really loved that design, and that's what they stuck to, and they ran with it. So,
and it fits very well with kind of the outdoor feel that we have here and all the outdoor stuff that we have going on.
Duck Creek, you go up to the Duck Creek Village, and that's kind of the idea of the design mentality that they had was, we want you to arrive in Cedar City and already feel like you're in the mountains and you're exploring our area of Cedar City in Iron County. So
yeah, for sure.
That was the whole design. So yeah, an airport, like you mentioned, I know Provo was one of those airports where their terminal was a box pretty much for years.
Yeah, yeah.
Granted, they only had Allegiant flights coming in a couple times a week. That was when they were really slow. Now it's, they blow us out of the water with how many operations they have, how many airplanes they have flying. It's crazy.
Provo is a hustle and bustle in town up there in Utah County. Well, I'm actually thinking too, I was a city manager previously, and we had an airport in my previous town, and we had a lot going on there, but it was just this tiny little terminal. And there's a lot I learned about airports, and maybe I'll pick your brain a little bit more on that later on the show. But right now we're going to celebrate an expansion to the terminal. So we've have this beautiful terminal, which its original size. Do you know about how big the terminal was?
Oh, I don't have that off the top of my head. I should.
Okay.
I'm really disappointed in myself in that. I want to say we're closer to maybe 15,000 square feet, somewhere in that ballpark area.
Is that before in the expansion?
Before, yeah.
Okay, so talk about the expansion. What have we done to our terminal here?
Yeah, so we're very excited. We're coming upon the ribbon cutting ceremony.
Celebrating on Cinco de Mayo.
We are.
I hear there will be tacos.
Yep, we're planning on it.
Okay, all right.
It's the first time we've had a big event like that and actually serving food, so we're very excited about that. So we'll have street tacos. Exciting. Yeah,
my staff's involved in helping you plan the party.
Oh yeah, you guys have been awesome. We really appreciate that. Yeah. So, but yeah, we decided, May 5th is what we're doing. It's a Monday, and we're doing it at noon, so people have the opportunity to come out during lunch.
Yeah.
However, you got to feed people when they're coming up for their lunch break.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
So yeah, we want to make sure you can do that. Exactly. Yeah. So we're really excited about that. So this expansion the idea started probably 3 years ago with my predecessor, Nick.
Okay. What's Nick doing now?
So Nick Holt, he's the I don't want to botch this. It's the aviation oh my gosh.
He's with the state or something now, right?
Yep. UDOT. He's with the state aeronautics.
Okay.
And he's like the market kind of development marketing person for the state. And he kind of manages over all the airports of the state of Utah.
Okay.
And how they're developing and things like that.
Yeah, because we still interact with him occasionally, right?
Oh yeah, all the time. I talk to him at least once a month. So
okay. That's awesome.
If he hears this, he's gonna be mad at me because I forgot his job title. So it'll come up here later. So.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. You were describing the expansion. So it started with Nick.
Yeah. So we started with a small expansion, just trying to find ways to accommodate for the passengers that we already have, because that's always been a problem. And I'll kind of go in that in just a second.
Yeah.
And so now we started construction. We went out all of our design process. We had a bunch of major changes to our design that we were going to do. And we broke ground last May. And now we're coming up on the ribbon cutting ceremony this May. And so we're looking at about 4,000 square feet, of expansion space and renovation space. So it's kind of a mixture of our previous seating area has been upgraded and then expanded onto. And then our baggage claim has been expanded as well.
Oh, okay.
And relocated in a sense. So,
and I haven't even come and checked it out yet.
You haven't?
No, I didn't. I guess I wanted to keep the surprise at the ribbon cutting for myself. Yeah,
you'll be very excited.
All right.
So, we're really ecstatic about it. Kind of going the background of the expansion. It's been needed for over a decade. Looking at our terminal, is built in 2005, beautiful facility.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, we love it, but it was built around the Brasilia aircraft, which was a 30-seater commuter aircraft in 2005. That's what we had operating the early 2000s,
gotcha.
Maybe even in the 90s, up until about 2011, 2012.
Okay.
And then we transitioned to the CRJ Canada regional jet through SkyWest.
Okay.
So it's always been SkyWest, but the aircraft size went from 30 seats to 50 seats.
Oh, all right.
And so our hold room, where we screen passengers and having them at the gate seating, was only built for 30 people.
Oh, okay.
Maximum occupancy was about 45, is what the fire marshal determined with the size. And so now we have a 50-seater aircraft
Right. Coming in.
for over a decade coming in, where the room for seating was only up to 45, and we could only fit 43 chairs in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we were already cramped on space.
Mm.
And so we've always kind of wanted to grow a little bit.
Needed to grow, it sounds like. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Needed to grow.
Yeah.
And, some of the benefits of what happened with the pandemic, I hate saying that word. I hate talking about it.
I know, but it had a
reality.
very real effect on airlines, and we can dive more into that. Actually, I want to pick your brain a little bit about that. But.
Yeah, that'd be good. So, but yeah, with that, we were fortunate enough to receive additional grants and funding to stimulate development growth. So the bipartisan infrastructure law, the bill we call it, gave airports of our size just over $5 million to spend over 5 years.
Oh, wow.
To support development, infrastructure, things like that are much needed at airports. In addition to the funding that we already get every year through the airport and airways tax that we have. And so with that money, we were able to look at the terminal, that and additional grants, I guess I forgot to mention. So there was a couple of COVID grants that we got that we were able to turn and actually put into the terminal building to justify social distancing, things like that.
Oh,
and so
right.
when this all happened, we had this money in the bank that was coming. That's what our first priority was, to go after the terminal and to be able to improve that infrastructure that we have and expand it, and using those COVID funds to help justify making that space larger. Yeah. Because you're packed in there. Yeah. And so we definitely needed that. And so we went from our original concept design was, where, 45 seating, or I guess occupancy that we have previously, going to maybe 70, 75, that we had some room for people to separate for the 50 seats. However, we had this money, we looked at it. We've been limited. If we had 2 aircraft arrive at the same time, we've had that before, where one SkyWest flight is delayed for hours, and then we have another one come in later. Yeah. So now we have 2 aircraft to deal with. Right. Or even diversions from St. George. So there's been so many times that we've had space constrictions. And part of our justification we've gotten in this project, I had a lot of screenshots from our cameras in the terminal to show how cramped the room was.
Wise man.
Yeah. It was a little rough. So, you've been to airports before. Yeah. And everybody that's probably gonna be listening to this, you go to a terminal. It's the funniest concept. You go, through ticketing, you want to get there early. You don't want to be rushed. So you get through security. Yeah. And you go get to your gate, and you're not going to sit right next to somebody. Yeah. You want to space out. Yeah. Exactly. You want your space, even though. And an outlet. Yeah. Of course, an outlet. So we plan for that too. And then the next hour, you're going to get in an aircraft, and guess what? You're sitting right next to somebody. I know. So people are just trying to delay that, that space, that you're going to be next to someone. They're trying to delay that squeezing in together. Yeah. So they want to get their space. They want to be comfortable in the airport terminal. And that's what our dream is, working with the mayor and the city, the FAA and our engineers. We were able to expand to a hold room. Now we're going to have the capacity to have 176 seats now instead of just the 45. Yeah. Wow. So what is that? Almost triple? Something like that? Yeah. So it's more than triple. It's more than triple. Yeah, more than triple. Yeah. So we're very excited for that. We don't have the seating just yet. We're working on that. Yeah. But we'll still have the space, and that's what's really great about it. And part of that concept of why we went so big, but if you think about it, still 176 seats, it's still pretty small compared to a lot of airport terminals. Oh, sure. So but for what we need, it's amazing. Yeah. And the growth that we can see with that is amazing, because we had a huge barrier for the growth of the commercial service airline route for Cedar City. If we have airlines, whether it's Delta, SkyWest, what we already have, and they want to expand more routes, larger aircraft, they can't, because we don't have the seating for it. Yeah. They'll look at our terminal and say, we'd love to bring in 90-seat aircraft, but we can't. Yeah. And we even did it for a while with the 76-seater with SkyWest, when there was some issues with seating requirements that Delta was imposing on that. And we could talk about that too. But so we were already to a 76-seater aircraft for a while, and it was tight in there. We had to hold people from going through security just to wait until the plane started boarding. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Our flights aren't always full, but when they are, it's chaos. So yeah. And so it really just opens up those barriers of entry that we have for airlines to come in. And then just what we've had in the past too. We're really excited about that. That's our number one thing that we're planning, was just to have the space to have those capabilities.
Yeah. So you said you planned for outlets. For me, that's all I care about an airport terminal is where the outlets, because you're working, or, you need your laptop, your cell phone's dying, whatever the case is. So how many outlets you got? Like, is it every other seat, or how does that, how did you plan that?
So we planned
the essentials
for the future of it. I'll preface myself on that. So the hard part about this is, we dream big on this terminal. It got condensed from what the FAA said we could do. Oh. So it got limited to
So you built it so there was space so that you can grow that seating within that area, is what you're saying. Okay.
So in that sense, the FAA, they will not cover seating.
Yeah.
So we're kind of on our own to do that. And I'll just tell you.
Is that considered part of maintenance or replacement?
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So just, we ran into a couple of little barriers like that where the FAA says, hey, you're allotted this much money. If you need other things, change orders, request it. And then they reject things because it's not part of the project or it's a maintenance project. So,
you said you were going to tell me something.
Yeah. So believe it or not, though, airline seating is very expensive. Just like everything at the airport.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. They got corner on the market is what they've got.
Yeah. So we're talking a 6-figure plus amount to purchase 176 seats.
Wow.
With armrests and chargers every third seat. To be able to plug your phone in or your laptop or whatever. So a very, very high price tag on that. We're still working some grant opportunities that we're looking at, some funding resources. So we're still planning to get that seating. It just wasn't feasible in this year's budget that we're at.
So you have this space for 176. So when we do the ribbon cutting, how much seating are you going to have right now?
Yeah. So right now we have 50 seats.
Okay.
I'm working with Salt Lake International Airport. They're actually going out to bid on or auctioning off some of their old seating that they have with Delta.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's an older style airline seat, but they're nice. They're heavy duty. They got the leather backs on them, leather cushioned seats. And so we're looking at that. We can get them for a very good price.
Yeah.
Yes, they are a little dated. We can maintain them easy, just reupholster. There's so many spares that they have that they're willing to part with for us. And then you can actually buy outlets that you can adapt to different types of seating for airline seating.
Oh, okay.
And so we're looking at ways to configure that and really just do some cost savings on there, but still have a good experience. We don't want to get seats that are damaged or not comfortable and things like that. And so we're trying to find our best avenue right now until we can get to a place to have the brand new seats. But it's not a cheap price tag on there.
So, when whoever's listening, remember the next time you go to the airport, you're not just sitting in some random little chair. You're sitting in a few $100s worth of seating in that outlet.
It's crazy. Even those uncomfortable seats that you go at big airports, so much money.
Oh, that's crazy. That's smart to work with Salt Lake International to try and get some of their stuff. I mean, because they're going through a ton of change up there, right? Okay, so something that you talked about a couple times is FAA funding. Mm-hmm. Will you talk about, I think we're a certain size airport and designation, so much a percentage of our funding for our airport comes from FAA. Can you kind of describe and explain that a little bit? I think most people don't know that. I didn't know that until I was a city manager and I had a little airport and learned how much funding from FAA funded our airport.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. Thank you so much. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about within the community. Because it surprises a lot of people and it makes people feel a lot better about how money's being spent locally.
It's not local tax dollars.
None of it.
Yeah.
So, thankfully Cedar City Airport has been self-sustaining or self-sufficient since I believe 2017 to where we haven't been taking any funds from the general fund, which comes from your local community taxes and things like that. So, just from the revenue that's produced on the airport alone, that's how we spend our operating budget.
Oh, awesome.
So everything that we're doing day-to-day operations comes from the people that use the airport, whether it's the airline, whether it's the tenants that have their own private hangars or the businesses and the fuel taxes.
Yeah.
And so just alone our day-to-day operating expenses, even what my staff and I are paid from and our insurance and things like that all comes from the airport fund. So the community is not paying for that unless they're utilizing the airport. And then that's where their money goes into our operating budget. Now, when it comes to these larger projects like the grants that we see, So we collect from our side of the airport. We're a commercial service. We're a primary airport, they call it, in the system. And we have so many operations of passengers and aircraft that use our airport that we're that category. So we receive actually, it just moved from $1 million a year of what we call entitlements to $1.3 million a year in entitlements, just due to inflation. Now, honestly, with inflation, we've been receiving $1 million for 20 years a year. Inflation, they've only increased that by,
You really didn't gain anything.
No. $1.3 million doesn't really buy us anything else when the project's $1 million project 10 years ago is now $3+ million.
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
At least. So kind of crazy. But that money, we call our FAA entitlement money, comes from the Airport Improvement Program, or AIPs, we call it. And that program is solely funded from the Airport and Airways, I think it's tax fund.
Oh, okay.
Or trust fund. I might have it mixed up. So that revenue source is collected from fuel taxes from airplanes and helicopters, obviously, and ticket sales. And so all that funding that we receive, that $1.3 million a year right now that we receive every single year, does not come out of your pocket unless you're flying out on a commercial flight.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Because we get some accusations from people saying, hey, this is a waste of taxpayer money.
Right.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But every project gets that kind of grief.
Right.
But for us, we say, hey, unless you're flying in a commercial airliner or anything like that, you're not paying for it.
Right. Well, and what it's saying is those who need the airport, those who are using the airport, are helping put money back into it so that they can have a continued use or growth in that continued use.
Exactly.
So, let's talk about the biggest thing on everybody's mind is the flights and the times.
Yeah.
Now, take us back before COVID, when at least here locally, I hear people talk about, we had such good flights, and then COVID happened, right? And I'll save you a little time in saying that during COVID, tons of captains retired. And a lot of the airlines used the funding that they got from the government to retire these captains. And then what happened is, as soon as COVID was done, there weren't enough captains. And so all of the major airlines started stealing captains from everyone else, SkyWest being one of the primary ones who was able to retain a lot of their captains, but then lost them to a lot of the major airlines. And so we kind of have had this captain shortage, which has strangely impacted flight times and how many flights can go in. Am I explaining this correctly?
Yep, you're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah. So talk to us about where our flights were before then, what it went down to, and where we're at today, and where we're trying to go. If you can capture that whole spectrum.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Great explanation on that. That was perfect. That's kind of where we're at. And I'll explain too a little bit of the challenges that we face even today.
Yeah.
The captain shortages, we've kind of resolved that, which is amazing.
Oh, great.
But there's some other issues.
Okay.
We'll go into that in a second. So before the pandemic, it's funny because today we have the same schedule that we used to have before the pandemic.
Oh, really?
This year, yes. It changed.
Yeah, I heard we were going back.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me what that schedule is so people know.
Typically what we saw for many years, the consistency is what people love. We had about an 8 to 9 a.m. arrival from Salt Lake City. So that way people in Salt Lake can come down to Cedar City as needed in the morning. Right. And then just after 9 a.m. departure Monday through Sunday. So 7 days a week, we're flying out at 9 a.m. Before the pandemic, we were about a 9 a.m. arrival to 10 a.m. departure. So we're a little bit earlier than what we used to be, which is good in my opinion.
I actually prefer that. You have more time in the day to get stuff done.
Exactly. And I wish it was even earlier, but we have what we have. So that's what our flight schedule was. And then we had the afternoon flight 5 days a week. Typically Tuesdays, we wouldn't have it just because Tuesday's a really slow day when it comes to airline travel. Not a huge priority. Not a lot of people fly on Tuesdays.
So if you want cheaper tickets, buy on Tuesdays.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Saturdays too, because usually whenever you're vacationers or whatever they're doing, or if it's business travel, Friday's the day that they're leaving to go on vacation, Thursday or Friday. And typically you won't see people return until Sunday. So Saturday's not a big day for us either. We still see people on the flights and whatnot, but So that's what we had was the afternoon flight about 5 to 6 p.m. around there is when it would arrive from Salt Lake.
Okay.
And then depart around 6 or 7 p.m. So we're at that same kind of time period that we used to be for years. And I think what the people loved about it was the consistency.
Yeah.
We went years without flight schedule changes. And people loved that they knew that they could book in the morning and then come back in the afternoon if they want to do a day of business in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
Or whether they're returning from a trip or whatnot. The best time to leave for vacation is early.
Yeah.
And the best time to come home from vacation is late.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want to use that time when you're gone. You know, you're spending all that money. You want to spend as much time there as possible.
Yeah.
And so thankfully we have that back. During the pandemic, we went through some crazy things. Just before the pandemic, St. George Airport shut down. So we were able to
boost a little,
capitalize on that. We added an extra flight. It was very successful.
Was that three times a day?
Yes,
is what
we
you were
had 3
doing?
times a day, which
was
was
that 5 days a week? You were having
5 days a week. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
3 flights, 5 days a week, and then just 2 flights the other day. So we were still having a lot of flights out of here. Our parking lots were so full. It was crazy. People were parking on the curb and blocking parking spaces. It was kind of mayhem, but it was a good mayhem.
A positive mayhem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously the bad word pandemic came around.
Yeah.
And, thankfully we actually lucked out.
Really?
Originally we were supposed to reconstruct our primary runway in 2019. However, St. George needed their runway reconstructed first. And so they got their funding prioritized ahead of ours.
Okay.
And so the FAA pushed our project back a year.
Oh.
And so spring of 2020, we broke ground on our runway reconstruction.
Yeah.
Which was amazing. Great timing.
Yeah, because all the flights significantly decreased at that time.
Yeah, and so we couldn't have the commercial flights because our runway was shortened at that time.
Yeah.
We were able to keep it open and only did half the runway at a time, which was a great project. That was probably one of my favorite projects to be part of back in 2020.
That was FAA funded, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
FAA funded. And so about March timeframe, we shut down commercial flights. We couldn't take larger flights. We wanted to try to be done as soon as possible into the summer because of our air tanker base for firefighting. They use that runway pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And so we finished that project in July of 2020.
Yeah.
And so just like that, we had 4 months of no commercial flights, which didn't really hurt us because everything was shutting down anyways.
Yeah.
Our air travel was very minimal. And so it was a really great timing for us. We already anticipated the loss of revenue. We already anticipated the loss of passengers.
So you planned accordingly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then once we reopened,
that is good timing.
Yeah, great timing. So once we reopened, so we're a little bit of background. We're an essential air service type of airport, and so all of our commercial flights are subsidized by the federal government, the FAA.
And that's what I was getting at, kind of that designation, we're essential air. What determines that designation? Yeah,
so it happened in the deregulation of the airlines back in the 70s. And back in the 70s, the way it used to run with the FAA, previously it was a couple different names.
Sure.
So we'll just call it the FAA today. Yeah.
Not to be confused with the FFA, which is prominent around in the rural areas.
All the time.
Yeah, so. I'm sure.
Almost once a week I hear FFA.
Yeah, no, I've been trying to not say it.
Yeah, good luck.
No,
anyways, it's awesome. And so in the 70s and prior to the 70s, the FAA controlled what airlines, where they would go to. And so you couldn't just come into if you're an airline, you couldn't come into the free market and say, hey, I'm going to fly from, A to B.
Yeah.
Or A to C and do these routes.
Salt Lake to San Diego or whatever.
You could not just come in and do that.
FAA controlled that. Interesting.
They designated the routes and they selected who was going on those routes. And
it's almost like playing favorites with the airlines.
Yeah, it was pretty messy. So with the Deregulation Act in the 70s, that allowed the airlines to have that free control, that free market to come in and fly these routes. However, their concern with that was you see markets like Cedar City and obviously in the 70s.
Yeah.
We're a lot smaller than what we were then.
Yeah.
We are now, I mean. And so they determined a lot of these markets as essential air service to help these, you could say, economically distressed communities still have that that air service, that connection to the world. And obviously the 70s, we didn't see jets then.
Yeah.
They were smaller little commuter planes.
Well, in these communities where you'd have to travel a really long ways to get to an airport. So essential air service is kind of that small connector flight to get where you need to get to maybe the larger airlines.
Exactly. Yeah.
Airports.
I mean, right now with traffic, you can make it to Salt Lake International in 3.5, 4 hours.
Yeah.
But back in the 70s, it took you much longer.
Yeah.
You know, before you had I-15 running through. I can't remember when I-15 was constructed. It might have been. Anyways. But yeah, you know, Las Vegas, Salt Lake, those were a really far driving distance for people to connect. So yeah, it connected us to the airspace world out there. So
hence the funding that comes with being designated essential air. Is there a size population or size that we get and that we lose essential air, or is that?
No. So thankfully we're kind of locked in. The federal government is trying to be getting rid of the EAS kind of market for a long time, but there's been lots of controversy.
Just because of the value that it provides to these small airports.
Yeah, and that's their justification to keep it, is it's a huge value to places like Cedar City. So the size of your city won't get rid of that. Really the biggest thing, unless they remove the whole essential air service, you know, funding in a whole, we won't see it go away unless we are able to double our current air service. There's not exactly double, but that's kind of what we
kind of a calculation that they do to figure some of that out.
So what the DOT will say is like, hey, you know, Cedar City, you can support this flight that we're providing you, plus a whole nother, you know, set of flights that match what we already are providing for you. We don't believe that you should have this funding anymore. And then they'll remove that funding, which if you're at that place and you're, you know, right now
you're doing well as an airport if you don't need essential air funding.
Exactly. So essential air funding covers 12 flights a week in a 50 passenger jet style aircraft. There's different ways to do it. You can have smaller aircraft for more flights.
Oh, I see.
Or bigger aircraft with less flights per week. But right now we get 12 a week. And so if we're able to match that, and we're at 24 flights a week, yeah, we shouldn't receive that funding anymore because we're doing well. So we're not at that point yet. But that's how they determine how that funding goes to us. So,
okay. Now, as far as, you know, people, so we have the 2 flights a week right now, or I'm sorry, 2 flights a day.
Yeah.
About
5 days a week.
5 days a week. What about, people are asking, well, can't we get 3 flights a day? What's the reality of that, or timeline of seeing something like that come to pass, or what would it take to get there eventually? Yeah,
the reality, it gets a little tricky. And so we'd love to see that. We'd love to see more flights coming in, especially different markets. You know, Salt Lake's a great market for us to be into because it connects us to our capital. It's a great airport. However, people have a lot of other interest in going other directions instead of going to Salt Lake. You know, a lot of us guilty of it. Going to Las Vegas, we fly at Harry Reid all the time.
Yeah, right. We know it.
Yeah, and it's cheap flights. And so I think a reality of an additional flight, I don't see us going to Salt Lake for a third time each day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think we need to go to another airport that has other flight options and other price options instead of an airport that's mostly Delta Airlines. Salt Lake, which we love Delta, they're great, but people like to have some variety, especially for pricing. So we're always pursuing something like that, even if it's not a third flight a day, but having some sort of addition outside of what we have right now, whether it is SkyWest adding another route with one of their partner airlines, whether it's Delta coming in, great, whether it's another airline. You know, we're not going to limit ourselves to just what we have. If anybody's wanting to come in, and we're pursuing that with multiple airlines always, you know, we're going to allow that. And that's what the new gating area will allow. We actually have 2 passenger loading gates now instead of just the one. And so we want to be able to have that option.
So another airline could potentially come in, is what you're saying.
Correct. Or, you know, another airline with SkyWest.
Oh, okay.
And they could have United per se with their current Delta or something of that mix. So, so the third flight or additional flights, you know, the airlines they control it all.
Right.
They really don't like to give us a lot of answers. They're very reluctant to share anything. Yeah. And so typically when you see a route coming in to an airport, you won't know about it until they are 100% in on coming into the airport. So,
well, they're strategic about where they're providing flights, right? Of course, part of their business and making money.
Exactly.
So let me ask first a clarifying question, then a couple of explanatory. Is that a word? Explanatory? Explaining questions?
Yeah.
We'll say explanatory. I made that word up if it's not real.
I think that works.
first, you said 2 flights a day, 5 days a week. But on those other days, like the Tuesday and the Saturday, it's not that you have no flights, right? Are there a single day a flight those other days?
Mm-hmm. So that's the morning flights that we talked about. Those are 7 days a week. So those Tuesdays, right now it's actually a Tuesday, Wednesday, but next month we're changing to a Tuesday, Saturday. So I'm advertising what we're seeing in the future.
Oh, I see. I see. So Tuesday, Saturday will be morning only.
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday are going to have morning, afternoon, or
correct. Yeah. And sometimes with those Tuesdays and Saturdays, we do see them flex it to a midday flight.
Okay.
That way you have, both directions of passengers.
Yeah.
Versus just because the morning flights, those planes don't come in very full in the morning, but in the mornings we see a lot of people leaving Cedar City. And in the afternoons,
I see on that 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes their strategy, they'll change that to where it'll be midday, Tuesday and Saturday. And a little bit more information on that too. I think you asked it earlier was on how the scheduling works.
Yeah.
And so it gets really tricky.
And while you're talking about that too, if you'll add in where we fly to, you've mentioned Salt Lake, but there's other places we fly to as well?
No,
or is it just strictly Salt Lake is what we're doing?
Lake,
okay. All right. Yeah. So dive in more into the scheduling then.
Yeah. So our airline contract with the EAS is held by SkyWest Airlines. And they fly as a partner with Delta Connection. So
they fly in behalf of Delta. So they'll fly in a full-fledged Delta Airlines plane, but they're kind of the what do you want to call it? The
operator.
Yeah, the operator. Yeah.
So they've actually even started changing their branding. It used to always be like it was Delta everything, and SkyWest was just the operator. Delta kind of controlled the flight schedule, and thankfully we've seen some shift to where SkyWest is in more control than they've ever been.
Oh, cool.
And so some of the branding that we're seeing on the airplane is actually saying SkyWest instead of Delta.
Okay.
Actually,
it still says Delta, right?
So on the side, it's a little Delta Connection on the side.
Oh.
And so we used to see more of all of our airplanes had the Delta logo on the tail.
Yeah.
The same design you see on all Delta airplanes. And now we're seeing more of the SkyWest branding, which is really awesome because SkyWest, if people don't know, is actually a local company. SkyWest is based out of St. George.
Yeah.
That's where their headquarters is. That's where they started.
Didn't their CEO grow up in was it Cedar City?
Cedar City. He grew up in Cedar City.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
And then one of their first stops for their airline when they began the airline was Cedar City.
Oh,
so they'd start in St. George, stop in Cedar City in their small little Piper passenger plane, and then they go to Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
And that's where they started in 1972.
Oh, that's awesome.
Pretty cool story.
So is that I've heard the term Delta Connect? Is that the branding? It's the SkyWest Delta Connect?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. So when you book your tickets, you book them through Delta. But when you come to the airport, you still see Delta on the wall and everything.
Yeah.
But all those agents, the gate agents, ticket sales, ramp agents are all SkyWest employees.
Yeah.
And you'll start to see more of that branding as we go forward. So now kind of going back to where I was getting at, it was they control more of that schedule actually out of the St. George office. Yes, there's input and influence from Delta on what they can and cannot support and what they want to see. And to make sure there's no conflicts with, their other flights and things like that. And so they've been able to take the reins of the schedules a little bit more. But like I said, it's still tricky because, they work with Delta, they work with United, they work with, oh my gosh, what's the other one? American,
yeah.
And so when they're planning these schedules, not only do they have to work out all their routes with all their SkyWest airplanes, but they also have to work in good relationships with Delta, United, and American. And so they can't, they all have to work together.
Yeah.
And if, we want a certain flight at a certain time, it's got to work out for all their markets. It's got to work out for their partner companies at Salt Lake International, all those other airlines. So it gets really tricky and kind of messy. And I look up to those, those schedulers and how they handle it all. It's so crazy how many things they have to deal with. So, and how to get everything to work. And a little bit in one of my college courses, you go into airline scheduling. Oh, it's crazy what these airplanes are doing. They're everywhere.
Yeah,
so,
no kidding.
Nonstop.
This is a little digression. There was a CEO of a oil pipeline company that I knew back when I would do PR for various organizations. And he would actually, scheduling is what made me think of this. He would when he would come across one of his competitors at the airport, he would look at the tail number of their plane and he would log it down, and then he download. And this was back when it was right when smartphones barely came out, and he had something. I think he would just pull it up on the internet on his phone, and he would track their tail number. So he'd go like, "Oh, my competitor's in Cedar City, Utah. I wonder what they're doing there." And so he could track their scheduling of his competitors. I'm like, it actually reminds me isn't there some kid that's been tweeting everywhere Elon Musk's plane goes?
Taylor Swift, Elon Musk.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that. It's kind of creepy, to be honest, but yeah, that scheduling thing is so nuts. And I don't think people realize how complicated it is and how much, and let me reemphasize this, how much effort you, city council and the mayor, the airport board have put in to getting us the best commercial flight times that we can and get back to where we were, that consistency you're talking about. And I, like you said, I feel like that morning time's even better. Maybe other people feel differently, but from a business perspective, I feel like that morning time's better. But how much effort went into getting those consistent times, meeting with SkyWest, trying to talk with Delta, using our airport consultant. I mean, I don't know if there's more you want to add to that, but I was just amazed at how much energy went into getting us decent times.
No, thanks, David. And I'm glad you've been involved in that process too. It's been really fun and exciting to be able to talk with them and try to work out some better times and things like that. So, we probably bugged them a little bit more than they like, but I mean, I think that's pretty standard in the industry.
Yeah.
We may have annoyed them, but we want to vouch for our community and our residents, and we want to make sure that they're getting the best flight times that we can get.
Well, and we appreciate the partnership that we've had with SkyWest and the value that it brings to us as a community. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people up north that fly down here into Cedar City just to do business here.
Yeah.
And meet with myself for economic development things or an innumerable number of things. I wonder if that's redundant, school of redundancy. Anyhow, okay. So one of the next things that I wanted to go into is we've talked about SkyWest and how that functions. Oh, yes. So I've heard this stat, and I'll preface it by saying, when I was kind of looking up to verify it, it is this stat that I'm going to mention is not related to commercial flights for commercial passengers. But I've heard this stat that we are the second busiest airport in the state, second to Salt Lake International. But that's not because of commercial flights, meaning passengers. That's because a lot of other types of flights come to our airport, including SUU School of Aviation, which plays a huge role in that.
Oh, yeah. Which
SUU Aviation, if people don't know this, but 1 in every 10 helicopter pilots in the nation, 1 in every 10 helicopter pilots is trained right here in Cedar City. And SUU Aviation actually played a huge role in changing regulation that hadn't been changed since the 70s.
Correct.
So I'll let you go wherever you want with that. If you want to talk about that regulation change, if you want to talk about the types of flights you see, maybe start with that. Like, what are the variety of other types of flights we see besides the use of our airport besides just commercial airline?
Yeah, well, stop me if I'm ever rambling or just, I could get into it for
rambling.
hours.
I told you that before the show. We love the rambling. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So just a little bit of a correction on there. So we're the third or fourth busiest airport in the state.
Okay,
so
third or fourth.
We kind of juggle back and forth.
Okay.
Excuse me. So Salt Lake International, and what we call it an operations.
Okay.
So an operation is a takeoff or a landing.
Okay. Not based on passengers, based on takeoffs and landings.
Correct. Okay. Yep. So for Salt Lake City International, there's no competition there.
Yeah, no question about
they have
that.
So many runways and so many flights. Number 2 is Provo, actually.
Okay.
So they're
that makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. Yeah. So they're pretty busy. They also have a flight school on their airport.
Okay.
And then a large community that likes to fly general aviation and things like that and business. Third is either us or Ogden. We kind of have been juggling that back and forth.
Ogden has a flight school there too, right?
I don't believe they do, at least not a collegiate program.
Maybe it's like private lessons.
Yeah, so there's always going to be independent flight instructors, and I think the amount of aircraft they have based on the field is like 250 or something like that. We have like 100 aircraft on the field, so they have a lot more airplanes on the field. But Ogden is largely populated by a lot of private aircraft, general aviation, we call it.
I want to say that's where my brother-in-law first learned to fly was up at Ogden.
Sense.
So yeah.
And there's a lot of smaller flight schools, private instruction and things like that at airports like that, because you're not going to go to Salt Lake International to go learn how to fly.
Yeah,
no
right,
way.
Exactly.
It's like, you're giving your 15-year-old the keys and say, hey, let's go down to Vegas and back.
Yeah,
you're not going to do
on
that.
The freeway. Yeah.
On their first drive ever. No way.
Good point.
So Ogden, is largely populated by that type of community. Because Provo, years and years ago wasn't as big as it is now.
Yeah.
Ogden was kind of that reliever. They have other reliever airports in the
there's
region
so many big businesses in Provo, tech, Silicon Slopes, as they call it. You have all these big wig techie people that are flying in and out of there. BYU and UVU, those universities, plus some of the other little schools. Yeah, there's so much going on.
So what we have going on here, though, and the reason why we're so busy, number one, it'll be Southern Utah University, the aviation program, which is a huge asset to our airport.
Yeah, Mike Maurer oversees that program.
He does,
not Mike Maurer that works in Governor Cox's office. This is Mike Maurer that works for SUU Aviation.
Yep. So Mike Maurer's been around for quite some time. So the flight school first started here in 2013, I believe, somewhere in that time frame, with Upper Limit Aviation. We had a couple years with them. They're mostly helicopters. And that's when a lot of we had a lot of growing pains with noise and helicopters. It was new to our region. Yeah. And it was definitely them trying to figure out how to fly, where to fly, and to not impact the community as much as possible. Yeah. A couple years down the road, 2016, SU and Upper Limit were partners before. You'd run them through the university for their classes, and then they'd be out at the flight school on the airport with Upper Limit Aviation.
Gotcha.
And so 2016, it transitioned to just fully SU. They bought out the program on the airfield. And since then, it's been solely SU Aviation, a full collegiate program. They sold some helicopters, or, with the business transfer, they were taken away, or they were just leased. And so then they kind of mixed in a lot more of the fixed wing, which airplanes, we call them fixed wing on the airport. Yeah. And so now
if you're in the aviation business, fixed wing.
Fixed wing is the name. Yeah. So instead of mostly helicopters, it transitioned to maybe 2/3 helicopters, 1/3 fixed wing airplanes. And that's why we see both in the region. They bought 10 aircraft, a fleet of the Cirrus SR-20 aircraft, high performance, great flight training aircraft. It's a little bit newer and nicer than what you typically be in, but for mountain flying, it's been amazing for the students to fly in. Plus you have that safety of the parachute in the canopy of the aircraft. So if you do run into an emergency, a stall, something like that, you can pull that parachute. Yeah. Once you do the aircraft, it's
toast.
Yeah, it's toast. So only use it if you have to, I guess.
What's cool is Mike actually organized this thing with some of the local officials of doing Fly Iron County each year, where state legislators all come down and fly Iron County and get to see, Zion and where do they go? Cedar Breaks National Monument, fly over kind of the local areas and just see the really incredible beauty around here. Last year it got too windy, so we didn't get to go. I was so sad because I was pumped to go on one of those helicopters. But
that's aviation for you. You never know.
Yeah. But I'm looking forward to doing it again. So anyways, you keep going.
Yeah.
This is great stuff.
No, you're good. So yeah, like I said, we'll have to have another podcast eventually, because I could talk about it for hours. So
see? Yeah, I told you, it's just easy conversation, right? We just talk about what you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So SUU, from that point, I think right now, and from that point, it was about 20 to 25 helicopters. They bought 10 of those Cirrus aircraft. They bought more now because you always have to account for maintenance time that aircraft are down. And then they had a couple other aircraft, whether they're dual engine for more complex training, or the gear retract. That's another type of license you can get in an aircraft, as a complex aircraft. So it has to have retractable landing gear.
Oh, interesting.
And then you do dual engine as another license you can get, a certificate that you get on top of your license. And so they offered that. And they've been growing that program like crazy since 2016. Yeah. Obviously getting busier. these last 3 years have kind of been a more of a stagnant pace of aircraft in the air and flight time, which is good because we've gotten really busy here.
Yeah.
And
gives you a little breathing time for right now because it's just going to. It's not like it's on a downward trend.
No,
it's kind of been up and now we're steady before we.
Well, that's what we've kind of faced is, obviously SU, they can get more aircraft and more students. They've been able to support that. They've been growing like crazy. However, that growth has kind of been limited because of certain barriers like, traffic in our airspace is a little crowded, even just space in the airport to build and develop. They're looking at always trying to expand and, there's some times where, we don't have any space available right now that has, either ramp side access and street side access. So we're trying to work through those challenges.
Yeah.
But anyway, since 2016, they've introduced a lot of things. The maintenance is one thing you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so they've started their own AMT. It's an aviation maintenance technician program.
Yeah. And we've through the Rural Communities Opportunity Grant, which is funding we receive from the state. We've been able to do some grants with them to help facilitate that maintenance program.
Exactly. So they started that up, and it's been a huge change and addition to our airport and our community. Amazing.
Yeah.
And some of the restrictions they have is space to work, and so they've always been looking at places to expand that campus on the airport. But our space is so limited right now.
Yeah.
Without having to spend millions and millions of dollars to build infrastructure. And so they've actually been doing some of this stuff offsite at other buildings in town. But you think of the aviation maintenance training would be on the airport. And so, so we're kind of working that out with SU.
But for clarification, there is acreage at the airport for building hangars and doing some of those other things too, right?
Yes, we have a lot of property available.
How many acres is it? It's like.
Oh, we have at least we have 16 by the National Guard Armory off of Airport Road, that corner. And then we have another, I want to say like 80 acres.
Yeah, I was thinking it was like 80 acres of developable land.
Yes, on the west side of the airport.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll see that someday. So hopefully in my time here.
So one thing that I'm having a recollection about, didn't we get funding for some sort of like portable tower or something? Am I just making this up?
No, we've looked into it.
Oh, you've been looking at it.
So we haven't got any funding for that or anything.
Okay.
We're pursuing a tower for Cedar City.
Okay.
And we're hopeful to be able to get that in the next several years, or next couple of years.
Gotcha.
What we see is a temporary tower sometimes that SUU actually pays for.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
So every semester, or I guess trimester, they have all these new students that need to get time flying in controlled airspace.
Oh.
And so what they've historically done is they'll take every single student, they'll put them in an aircraft with an instructor, fly them down to Vegas or up to Salt Lake or Provo and fly in that controlled airspace. That's very expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of fuel time, things like that. And so they've determined that there's these programs that allow temporary towers to come into airports to temporarily control the airspace for reasons.
And is it something that just like folds up and they stand it up, or what's a temporary tower?
How so work? It's funny because you're like, oh, it's got to be up in the air, right? They simply are box trailers with windows.
Oh,
that's all it is. Yeah.
The general term is tower, but basically it's a control room.
Mm-hmm.
I see.
So it's just a small control room. That's what we call them, is control towers. Because on a regular or a larger airport, you'll see the tower.
Yeah, because it's up in the sky. Yeah.
So it's always we always just call them towers, but it's just a control room on the ground.
Yeah.
It's portable on a trailer. Usually what you'll see is not like a semi truck, like a larger, but a smaller box trailer with windows.
Yeah.
So there's a couple companies out there that provide that. And so SUU, we've seen it in the past before SUU with the air tanker base.
Yeah.
And I'll go into that in just a second too. Where they get busy enough to where they will pay for a tower to come in just to increase safety and control.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It gets a little chaotic out there sometimes.
So tell me about, you mentioned the air tanker. Tell me about the other types of aircraft.
Yeah.
We see military, we see firefighting or wildfires. So talk about those just briefly.
Yeah. So we talked about SkyWest Airlines. They're flying the Canada Regional Jet 550 right now into the airport 12 times a week. That's our commercial service. We talked about SUU, talked about tankers. I'll go a little more detail on the tankers. So
what is the tanker? I don't know that I fully understand that.
So they're the aerial fire retardant tankers, so they drop fire retardant.
Oh, for the wildfires.
For the wildfire.
Oh, I see. For some reason, I was thinking fuel tanker.
We have all of our terms that we say at the airport. It's kind of hard to get away from those sometimes. So we have what is it? So it's not it's a BLM and Forest Service. So a multi-agency air resource center is what they call it.
That sounds very bureaucratic.
Yes, very much so.
Perfect.
Yep, that's how it goes. But, and so we have that base at our airport full time. Obviously, they're only open seasonally.
Yeah.
And so they support the region from down to the Arizona Strip. They're going towards Colorado. They go into Nevada, and then about halfway or further, up in towards northern Utah. And then it's Hill Air Force Base covers the northern region.
Oh, I gotcha.
So that's where we see all those big airplanes in the summertime is they're actually fighting all those wildfires, doing suppression.
Gotcha.
They have a bunch of other aircraft. Aside from that, we have our mail carriers with UPS, FedEx. We see those 5 days a week come in the morning and leave the afternoon.
Oh, okay.
And then general aviation. So those are your private owners.
Yeah.
Whether they're flying small aircraft, larger aircraft, whether they're based here or coming here, stopping. We see the business side of things. So it's going to be more of your
private jets.
There's a term for it. Commercially, not commercial, but anyways, drawing a blank right now. That'll be your business jets. Yeah. Your private companies that have their jets coming in, whether they're renting them, they own them. Right. We have a couple based on the field right now through like BZI and whatnot.
Yeah.
Which is really awesome to have here.
Yeah. That's cool.
Charter jets that we see coming in for events, tourism, things like that all the time. Medical resources. We see life flights, King Airs that come in, their jets come in. Helicopter sometimes stops, and it's based at the hospital. Yeah. But they come here to fuel sometimes, and then to get out of the elements in a hangar. So,
do you see a lot of military aircraft coming in and out?
We do. They're very inconsistent. Go figure.
Yeah, right.
You never know when they're going to be here or not, and they plan very shortly in advance. But yeah, we see Black Hawk helicopters. We see Apaches.
Yeah.
Most of those typically come from the Utah Guard up north.
Yeah. We hear them sometimes when we're doing the podcast right outside the window and like, oh, there they go.
Yeah, you're at a great location right here off the airport.
I know,
so
yeah, exactly.
A little bit of noise interruption, but it's okay because we love helicopters, right?
Yeah. Well, just to kind of, I guess, wrap up, there's actually a couple things I briefly wanted to cover. First, gearing up for the Olympics up north, and the governor's been really big on that, and they're working with manned drones. I forget what the technical term is for it. Which to me, they just look like mini airplanes with drone-like propellers on them. But has Cedar City's airport had any conversation about participating in some of that? Because they're looking at pads across the state. And if so, what can you say about that and bringing the Olympics to Utah and hopefully some of that to Cedar City area? Yeah.
So we actually haven't gotten a conversation yet about the Olympics per se. What you're talking about is the advanced air mobility VTOL aircraft, vertical takeoff and landing. And so we've looked at in our master plan, future plans to be able to have those landing pads as we're talking about.
Yeah. I know the governor's office has been very big at having advanced mobility and having pads identified in preparation for the Olympics.
And Utah Aeronautics has been big on that too.
Yeah.
Utah's been one of the front runners in the nation for a state in this advanced air mobility and the future of aviation and growth. So it's been really awesome to see that. Cool. But we actually had a Beta aircraft. Beta is a manufacturer.
Yeah, Beta's the company. Yeah.
They actually stopped through our airport. It wasn't the VTOL. It was the traditional kind. So it was manned, but it was an electronic aircraft with batteries and no gas powered engine.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, they stopped through. They went to St. George, Cedar City. They stopped in Provo.
I guess that's the main distinction is it's not fuel, it's battery operated.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's more about just advancing that technology to be the unmanned. Obviously, when they first start this, they're going to have it manned to test it.
Right.
And so that's what we're looking at now is, and thankfully with airports, something we've kind of talked about recently is you talk about these pads that we have and that it was a big thing circulating. We need to have these, pads for these type of aircraft.
Yeah.
Well, what we've kind of been looking at is, we already have helicopters on the airport.
They can use the same pad.
Yeah, they can.
That's been my thought too. I think it's just almost like electric cars. They got to figure out charging stations. I'm guessing
that's the biggest part of it. Yeah. So it would be nice.
Power demand.
Yeah, exactly. So the pads that you think about too is the nice thing about these aircraft is the noise reduction, the safety of them. So you can relocate these locations off airports if the airports are too far away.
Gotcha.
And that's the whole kind of purpose of this VTOL that they talk about is the abilities they have to travel anywhere and have the low noise, low impact. You have, top of a building, you can have just like you'd see a helipad. And so that's what they probably are gearing towards more, is not just on airports, but they want to see off airports. Yeah. Because then you don't want to bring everybody to this focus point of an airport where it's already congested. Right. You now have these opportunities to pull them away from airports a little bit too. Yeah.
So have you, so I work with 47G, which is the aerospace and defense. Have you spoken with them much before?
Not much, no.
So you and I need to connect.
I watched your podcast.
Yes, with 47G, because they're really helping lead the way in that advanced mobility, which I think is an extremely good opportunity for Cedar City area. Yeah. Okay, two things I want to conclude on. One, tell us what your background is. How did you get to, and be brief, but like, what were you doing before you were the airport manager, and what made you decide to go into airport management? It's almost being like a hospital administrator, right? You're not the doctor, so you're not the pilot. You're managing the facility and the operation
to make sure everything runs. That's my job, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a great question, David. Thanks. So I actually started as an aircraft fueler for a fun job while I was going to go to college.
Oh, really?
And so I started fueling airplanes. Like, that's a great side job. I love airplanes. Yeah. I grew up in Cedar City. Oh, yeah. And so I used to always sit at the end of the fence and watch the old air tankers. Oh, really? The old Orions and the P2s, the World War II post-era aircraft that they converted to air tankers. And so I always loved aviation, military aircraft especially. World War II aircraft, my favorite. And so I was like, hey, it'd be a fun job to go out and fuel. And I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought, and was able to kind of progress supervising fuel operations. And then I stepped into airport operations, I want to say 6 years ago. Okay. Working under the last airport manager, and just really loved it. Maintaining the airfield, ensuring the airfield's up to par for safety and security. That was kind of my job, managing plans before this. And so I really just kind of fell in love with this airport after working at it. I mean, I always loved aviation. Right. But that's kind of what got me into it. I didn't expect to have a career in this. Yeah. I was looking at going maybe towards like the Forest Service, like every small town, kid likes to do here in Cedar City. Well, and you were working under Nick for a little while, right? And then you stepped into the position. And some people might hear, whoa, you've been doing the management operations of it for only 6 years. But man, what you have been doing here for in the last year and a half that I've been here, I've been blown away at what you've accomplished and the level of professionalism that I've seen. It's above and beyond some small airports that I have been involved with, who people have been there operating for, 15, 20 years. I mean, what you're doing and the value that you bring to Cedar City's regional airport is tremendous. And I would say to those who are listening, if you haven't met Tyler, you need to meet him. Bang up job. You will be wooed by his mustache, and his charm. So, and I have to say, you were, thank you, David. You're welcome. You were unsure of what to expect on coming on this podcast, but you have been one of the most knowledgeable guests that I've had in talking and being able to discuss what's going on. And it just oozes out of you, your passion for the airport and what you understand the history behind it and where it's going and where we'd like to go. And that's awesome to me. So, I guess the very last thing is, tell us where the airport's located. And since we have this ribbon cutting coming, give us a little more, remind us on the detail on the ribbon cutting, then we'll kind of wrap up from there. Yeah. Well, David, thanks so much. I appreciate that. Yeah. And, I may spit a little bit too much detail. It's kind of one of my faults is sometimes I'll just unload everything. That's what the podcast is all about. That's why it's conversational we want that detail. It's always hard when, you ask a question and somebody is like, well, yeah, no, it's pretty nice. We want good detail. Yeah, exactly. The fact that you even said maybe another time we can come on and talk about this part, I would love that. But yeah, give us the rundown again of the ribbon cutting and what to expect. And Yeah. So May 5th, 12 o'clock noon, we'll have that. So the terminal's located on Aviation Way, 2560 Aviation Way. You can't miss it. The beautiful log cabin, just out here in Cedar Valley. We're, I guess, trying to think what else other details I haven't explained on there, but yeah, so we're very excited about that ribbon cutting. We're hopeful to have a lot of attendees on there.
The mayor will be there. Scott Phillips has been helping with the planning.
Yeah, he's been amazing.
Gabby Costello has been helping kind of get the word out with my staff there. And then airport, what's the URL, I guess, for the airport if people are trying to check out the airport?
Yeah. If you want to look up anything on the airport, you can go to the Cedar City website for one, and then click on the airport tab, or cedarcityutah.gov/airport.
Yeah.
We're actually working on a page right now to get off the city website. Sorry.
You need
branding.
Something else. Yeah.
The best branding you can have is to have your own website.
That's that way, I've been needing to do for economic development too.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
well, that's great.
But yeah, so we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We're probably not as active as we should be because it's either me or Gabby that are doing social media posts.
Dallas will send you a collab on Instagram.
There you go.
For this podcast, and you can share it and tell all about it. We hope everybody comes out to the ribbon cutting on Cinco de Mayo, May 5th. Get some tacos at noon. The airport. Did you say the address of the airport yet?
Yep, 2560 Aviation Way.
25. I'm not going to repeat it because I'm going to mess it up. But Tyler Galetka, our airport manager for the Cedar City Regional Airport. Tyler, thanks so much for coming on.
David, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you.